everybody. I'm Sakshi, and welcome to today's Speakin webinar. It is my utmost privilege to have Mr. Amit Sharma with me on board today. Mr. Sharma is the Vice President and the Head of HR of Volvo, where he provides strategic HR leadership across Volvo Group of India. He was formerly the Country HR Head Director of TE Connectivity. With more than 2 decades in the HR domain, he has worked with the top line of organizations like Philips, Johnson & Johnson, Indian Oil, and Ballarpur Industries. The wide spectrum of his focus areas have been HR business partnering, capability and culture building, organization development and change management, employee relations engagement, and M&A, and so on. Apart from an MBA in HR, he also holds a diploma in training and development from the ISTD, New Delhi, and is certified OD practitioner from ISABS, New Delhi, and a certified coach in Neuro Leadership Institute. I welcome you, Mr. Sharma. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Sakshi.
Thank you. Getting on with it, it's a real honor to have a leader of your stature with us today. And with the amount of time that you spent in this industry, in the HR domain, you would have seen it grow and evolve over the changing times. So I recently read an HBR article which was about a G3 mechanism, the CEO, the CFO, and the CHRO being the 3 drivers of business. And also it talked about the evolving role of HR in business. In your experience, how has the purview of the VP of HR or the CHRO, how has the purview of this role increased in the changing times?
Sure, and that's a really nice question, Sakshi, and thanks for asking that. I think it's a good way to start this conversation. If you really look at it in any organization, this triad, if you call it, of CEO, CHRO, and CFO, that forms the crux of whatever we are going to do in the businesses, because ultimately business is about what? Business is about people, business is about money. So these two have to come together, and then only the goods will be produced or services will be produced and the customer's need will be met. So primarily these are the 2 principal drivers in any organization. Apart from that, you can talk of machinery and everything else, which are operations which comes in, or sales. This is all after. The first thing you need is you need to have the right people, and you also need to have the right capital structure. So in any progressive organization, you will see this triangle being at the core. It's about, you can say one is the right hand, one is the left hand, and we can debate which is the right, which is the left. That's a classic debate which we'll keep on having with the CFOs and CHROs. But the larger point is that both are the 2 hands of the CEOs in making things really happen and making a difference to the organization. Coming to how it has evolved, and that's an interesting piece, because when I look at it, the HR head role at one point of time earlier, when I was kind of growing up in my career, and I was looking at the HR head's role during those days, that used to be more like a HR service provider. You have to take care of compliances, you have to take care of admin, and you take care of recruiting, payroll, typical the services aspect of it. And over a period of time, HR role has really become extremely critical, intertwined part of the business. And that's a massive change which has happened in this function. No other function has evolved to that level which HR function has evolved. And today it's at the primacy, it's at the center of this entire organizational structure. So because everything we are talking about, everything is revolving around people. We are talking about the fact that people are the most critical assets. Then how do we really manage this asset? Or how do we really, or I would not even call it an asset, I would call it actually it's a potential. How do we really manage this potential, and how do we really grow this potential? So that's a massive change which has happened from HR leader being earlier seen as a service provider to an HR leader today being seen as an equal business manager who specializes in the domain of human resources. So that's the classic shift which has happened.
Absolutely. As you said, Mr. Sharma, a great way to start is to actually understand what this role is all about. If I zoom out a little away from the zone, the businesses and the worlds are ever evolving. And, so how has this entire HR landscape, shifted in all these times? Talking about probably touching some points like the major global trends that are happening in HR.
See, the major trends, if you really look at it over the last few years, we were getting into a lot of technology in HR. We were getting into HR, which was more technology enabled, AI enabled, and we were also looking at leveraging IT force uh, for the business. What was also happening at that time was when we were doing all of this, we were also reducing the HR ratios. So in terms of number of people to HR, that was changing. And from what it used to be earlier, when one HR person, if it was managing, let's say 100 people, over a period of time became 200, 250, 300, in some companies even 500. So what happened was HR role became more of managing a technology at the back, and that's what it was kind of going to. Now, suddenly there's a shift which has happened now with COVID. And suddenly, when you have seen things around, when we are dealing with mental health issues, we are dealing with employee safety issues, we are dealing with employee health issues, and suddenly we are finding that yes, so we need to have technology, but we also need to have equal focus around heart. And I've always believed that HR has to play more from heart and not just from technology. It's good to leverage technology. It's good to leverage all the IT infrastructure, AI, machine, or whatever we may call it. It's all good. But on top of it, it has to be the fact that an HR person needs to connect to the employees, understand what they are feeling, and try to then come up with mechanisms, come up with policies, come up with initiatives which are ensuring that those issues are resolved. And that's where the connect is going to happen. Another shift which has also happened over a period of time is that earlier HR was always supposed to be the go-to person for any employee issue. If something is to be done, if it's an HR matter, the business leader will say, "Hey, call up HR, and HR will answer this query." If something is good, something is bad, policy is clear, policy is not clear, a disciplinary action is to be taken, a promotion decision has to be taken, whatever. Ultimately, people used to say, "Oh, my job is not to manage. My job is to manage sales, or my job is to manage operations." The HR's job, which is supposed to manage people and go and speak to the HR person. Over a period of time, what has also happened that HR has evolved as a coach. HR has evolved as a coach to the business leaders in terms of building their capability in managing people. And that's another major shift which has come in from a point of view of HR. We are saying that as an HR leader, we are responsible for developing our leaders to manage people well. We are responsible for creating the right ecosystem in the organization to ensure that leaders can manage their business. And when we say manage the business, people are an integral part of managing the business. You can't say that I'll only manage the technical aspect of the business and leave out the people aspect of it. So enabling that people leadership, enabling that people manager competence, I think that's a big shift which has happened now. And as an HR as an HR function, I would say we are more focused around building that kind of ecosystem in the organization, that kind of a capability. And if you take one step further from there, how do you build that capability? It's about how do you start creating that culture? How do you start focusing on the right culture in the organization where these behaviors are appreciated? How do you start creating a culture in an organization where employees are seen as a responsibility of a manager to manage that, and they take not only a responsibility, they take full ownership of their people end to end. So that's the culture piece. So these are the critical shifts which are seen now, and that's going to be really path breaking in terms of all progressive organizations, that where HR starts to play a role of a culture champion. HR starts to play a role of developing the right capabilities in the organization, but then it's their job to ensure that those capabilities are displayed. And on third piece, we ensure that we have our ears to the ground, we understand the employees, what employees are feeling, and we create those initiatives which are sensitive towards employees' needs, and we have our heart at the right place.
Very, very insightful points, Mr. Sharma, about keeping the heart in the game. And I would just like to jump onto a question which I would have come to later in the later part of the webinar, since we've already touched, talking about how the senior leadership and management is also expected to drive the objectives of the CHRO. So given, the current repercussions which are happening in the world due to the economic crisis which we are seeing, and the reduction in the employability quotient, if there was one advice that you could give to the senior management or the C-suite employees regarding, driving a more suitable culture or upskilling themselves or creating a basic motivational environment, what would that be?
I think the biggest advice, I shouldn't call it advice. I think what the leadership teams need to do is build the concept what we call as adaptive leadership. Is a concept where we are saying that maybe a leader may not have all the answers. Let's involve everybody in finding the right solution. We don't know what's going to be there. We don't know what's the right way. And this entire pandemic has shown us nobody knows what was the right way of doing it. Nobody had experienced such a downturn at any point of time. One would have seen various economic cycles, but such a massive change, and that too so abrupt, and that too so sudden, nobody had ever envisaged, and no leader would have known it. The companies which have survived and the companies which have done well are the ones who have taken the collective intelligence of the group to decide what's going to happen. I think the way the leadership needs to behave going forward is about ensuring that we are using the might of the collective intelligence of the entire team. It's not that as a leader I have all the answer and please go and do it. We have to move away from the directive style of a leadership to a more participative style of leadership, a style where we are encouraging, where we are putting, where everybody has a skin in the game. As a leader, I'm not ashamed of saying that, I don't know the answer. Let's find out, and then collectively decide what's the right way of doing it. I think those are the things which needs to happen, and that's the shift which is happening in good organization. I can also tell you that, but that's what I think is the behavior which is required going forward. It's more about how we are being adaptive. It's more about how we are being agile. It's more about how we are using the collective intelligence of the entire group towards what is going to be what we need to do going forward.
Absolutely. Keeping the theme on with the current changes in the scenario, this is a question I personally also have, that on one end, there is, a spike in the number of unemployed workforce due to the pandemic going on and the economic crisis. But also at the same time, there's also a lot of questions around, it is becoming increasingly difficult to hire the right kind of talent into the industries. So there's this dichotomy which exists in the market. One side of which is really talked about, which is unemployment. But the other side of it, I'd really like your perspective about that.
Yeah, no, that's a concept, and there's some echo somewhere. Okay. So
is it okay now?
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah.
So this is something which we are dealing with, for quite a long time. I think this is not a current phenomena. This is something which I have been facing right from the time when I started recruiting, that for a few jobs you have large number of applicants, which shows the kind of unemployment which we have, and that shows the kind of need for job creation which we have in this country. At the same time, when we go through them, we find hardly a few people who are employable, who are up to the mark in terms of specifications for the job. And that is where I think we really need to relook at it in terms of our entire uh, educational curriculum. And it's also about how as an industry we are participating in that. See, it's very easy to always push the blame on the government or push the blame on the academic institution that you are not generating employable people. But what is our responsibility towards it? What as industry we are doing to generate that employability? Are we participating enough with the academia in terms of customizing the courses for our need? Are we sending our officers to the academia to teach students what the skills required in the organizations? Are we setting up the labs for them for the new generation engines? For example, we are today at BS6 engines. I don't know how many labs in India would have a BS6 engine in their mechanical branch workshops, and you will find it very, very few. I can say that confidently. And many of them would have still the old engines, as part of their workshop practice, and so on, so on and so forth. If you look at it today, the automobile, the entire automobile today is no longer a mechanical device. The automobile has become a mechatronics device. It has electronics, it has computers, it has a programming logic control, it has sensors. Apart from having the mechanical heart, which is the engine and the gearbox. But the engine and the gearbox are again controlled by electronics and by computer, by the chips which are there. So we really need to have the right kind of partnership with the academia to make sure that all of that gets incorporated in the course curriculum, and that's when we'll be able to create people who are more industry relevant. And that's one thing which that partnership needs to happen very closely between academia and the industry to create more employable people. That's point number one. Point number two, which I always see, is that the biggest problem which people have or the reason for they're not being successful in the organizations is lack of soft skills. And we don't focus on soft skills in our academia. Most of our technical schools focus on technical curriculum. I remember when I did my engineering, there was only one course in we called it industrial sociology and industrial psychology out of 8 semesters, and each semester would have about 5 to 6 courses. So almost about 50 courses is what we study over a period of 4 years as part of our engineering. And how many courses as far as the arts are concerned, or liberal arts is concerned, or psychology is concerned, sociology is concerned? One, plus one of English, and probably one of economics. So 3 courses out of a bouquet of 50. So where is the focus? And what happens when people come to organizations where they lack? They lack in agility, they lack in learning agility, they lack in adaptability, they lack in emotional quotient or emotional adaptability. We expect them to be innovative. We expect them to think out of the box. We expect them, to have to manage conflicts well. We put an engineer on the shop floor and expect the person to manage the teams, the entire wage associates which are there, and then the person has had no formal training in terms of managing people. The person's training is only on the technical skills, and suddenly you start seeing conflicts which start to happen between a supervisor and the workforce, because the person has never learned how to manage conflicts. And then whatever learning happens, then that happens on the job, and then some people survive, some people are not able to survive. So the fact that in our course curriculum today we are not focusing enough on softer skills, and these are the skills which are key to success. For if you'll have two people of almost similar kind of technical aptitude, or even somebody has a technical aptitude which is shared lower than technical aptitude of the other person, but if that person who is a shade lower is extremely good in terms of his human relation skills, I can tell you that person will be more successful than the other person, unless you are doing a pure individual contributor techie role. Now that's very different. But in most of our organizations, we have roles which are not strongly individual contributor techie roles. Each roles are interdependent, and we are working in a larger organizational ecosystem. And this is where working together makes a lot of difference. So that piece, I think we need to ensure that in organizations there is enough, in academia, there is enough focus on developing soft skills too. And when you'll have this combination of both an industry relevant curriculum, number one, number two, also equal amount of focus on soft skills, that will ensure that there is better employability of these students who are coming out, and you will start seeing a close match between the two. Now this is something, if you look at the supply side from the industry, from the academia. This third element around this, which is the supply side when it comes to lateral entry. Now in the lateral entry, what happens is that I have learned something, and let's say 20 years back I have done my MBA. 22 years back I've done my engineering, and after that, have I learned after that something or not? Or if I'm just sitting on my past laurels, which I learned about 20 years back and got a good rank, and then it's done. So what is the learning agility today? Or is there learning agility in the people? So what the skills keep on changing. The requirement for a skills keep on changing. As you grow higher in the system, you need to acquire new skills, because what is needed at that level will be very different what was needed at the lower level. Or when you are moving from one role to another, what kind of learning agility you have to ensure that I can do a different kind of a role. Now, many people don't show that. They just stick to whatever they know and just try to keep on doing the same thing day in and day out, and then they just hit a ceiling. And after that, when they can't grow, they are neither able to grow in that organization nor able to apply outside, because they have kind of hit the roof. Beyond that, there is nothing for them. So the learning agility and ability to constantly add value to oneself is very critical. I think these are three factors which are important in terms when we look at the employability and the employment scenario in the country.
Thank you for the explanation of this deep-rooted dichotomy. Since we touched the topic of the automobile industry and you have the bird's eye view of being the VP and the head of HR, could you name a few challenges which the automobile industry is facing at this point of time in your purview, which probably are a little different from the other industries?
The automotive industry, if you look at it, there are challenges which are coming in from a larger, I would call it environmental area, and then there's challenges which are coming from a people standpoint. If you look at the larger environment issue or the business environment issue, we find that automotive industry today is taxed on the higher side. So our products are taxed almost at 28%, which is extremely high taxation rate compared to the taxation rate for all others. It's an essential service. A truck or a bus is not a luxury, but the taxation is still higher. So what happens that because of that, the demand is on the lower side because it's expensive to buy it. And when the demand comes lower, then the industry has its own cycle of coping with it. So that becomes that's one challenge which this industry is facing. The second challenge which this industry is facing about the vehicle scrappage policy. So we have vehicles, but even in spite of the fact that they have run their utility, they still continue on the roads. We don't have a vehicle scrappage policy in India that after 15 years or 10 years or whatever is the most appropriate number for that category of vehicle. After that, the vehicle will be scrapped and you can buy a new one, and that's there in in many of the advanced countries. So that also creates its own dynamics around the demand. So those are the two big ones I would say, which are there from a larger environment perspective, and also the fact that currently in the automotive industry has made a major shift from a BS4 to BS6. Now, India is one of the, I would say, the only countries in my knowledge which has made this leap of change in one go. Otherwise, from BS4 you come to BS5, and from BS5 you go to BS6. Or in Europe it was Euro 4, Euro 5, Euro 6. But in our country, we took a significant jump, which again disrupted this entire automotive industry, and which again disrupted, the demand. It also had a lot of investment going into it. So this industry is facing this challenge. On one hand, we had to put a lot of investment. On the other hand, the demand is not, is not getting generated because of the fact that we don't have adequate scrappage policy, and also the fact that we have high taxation rate. And the last piece I would call it from a larger environment perspective is the fact that the lending is also today squeezed. It's not as easy to take loans from the banks these days. So that's another piece which is impacting the demand. So those are the things which I would say from a macroeconomic perspective which are impacting it. Zoom in to the people challenges. Now that starts to reflect, because then what happens is when the demand is a bit uncertain, you also need to meet the challenge of workforce fluctuations, because with the changing demands you also have to have your workforce patterns or a manning pattern which are equally flexible with respect to that. So how do you deal with it is a challenge, and ensuring that we're doing it in a compliant way, ensuring that we do it in the right way, in a sensitive way, that always becomes a challenge in such kind of industry. The second important piece is about the fact that we are in a premium segment where whether a Volvo vehicle is made in India or any part of the world, the quality has to be the same, because it's about the brand, it's about the trust people have in the brand. So it takes a lot of time to train people on such quality standards, which are generally extremely higher than most of the others. I'll not comment on the other industries, but typically what happens is when we say a Volvo product, it has to be world class in terms of its quality, and which means people have to be there with an extremely high level of proficiency. So training them creates its own challenge and takes its own time in keeping that in creating those industry ready people or the floor ready people for that. So those are two broad things which we see over here. The third piece, which we're also seeing a disruption in the auto industry now, is moving to a electromobility. And we say that that from a point of view of automobiles, every company is trying to reduce its carbon footprint. Every company is trying to create vehicles which are less and less carbon emitting vehicles, which means we have to move to alternate technologies. And when we have to move to alternate technologies, what do? We have to reskill our people towards that. We have to create new capabilities towards these emerging technologies. And that also becomes a challenge, because then the old technology is there. So it's not that it's going away. We continue to maintain that, but we also start to parallelly make the shift so that we are future ready, and gradually we start moving towards an environment where we have vehicles which have very limited carbon emission. So creating those right capabilities becomes another challenge. Those are some of the people challenges which we see, apart from the economic challenges which I shared with you.
Thank you for this holistic view into the challenges of the industry. Moving into the basic change, the buzzword nowadays is remote working, work from home. But there's this one lesser talked about aspect of it, which is remote management. Across hiring, retention, and all the other HR functions, the entire process has become virtual. It has become non-personal. How in these situations are the organizations changing to now hit the bullseye with respect to these processes?
No, that's very critical. And coincidentally, I was speaking to one of my friend, a few minutes before this conversation, and she asked me, how is it going? I said, hey, work from home. And she said, I'm so tired of this work from home. I just want to go to office now. It's just getting on the nerves. And that's a reality across many people. It's not just she who said that. I can tell you, most of the people when I'm speaking to, they are really waiting for the time to come. They can go back to office, meet people, interact people, leave the normal life. So this is become an abnormal life which is being led by people all sitting remote. The remote working was good, or the work from home was good in the initial days. People enjoyed the fact that they are not going to spend time on the traffic. They're not going to spend time on the road with the honking and in pollution. They are in their homes in a much cleaner environment. But off late, it's all, they say excess of everything is bad. And when you are forced to do something, it's even worse. So this is what is happening now, because this is happening by force and this is happening by excess, and you don't have a choice. It's creating a same kind of feeling in the people which people had earlier when they were forced to come to office, and especially in the companies where there was no remote working or no work from home. They used to feel, hey, why can't we work from home? Why can't we do that? And it's an opposite thing now. People are saying, hey, why can't we go to office? So it's creating almost similar emotions in the people, though both are at the extreme end. And the value in the sweet spot always lies somewhere in between, that there has to be a healthy mix of both. But having said that, we don't know when this period will end. Everybody has their own guess. Somebody is saying by end of this year, somebody is saying middle of next year, somebody is saying end of this quarter. It's all, everybody is making their own guesses in terms of when they'll go back to work, when the vaccine would be there, or when when the curve will flatten out, the COVID will come down. So in that situation, when we don't know what's to be done, it's critical that we start developing the capability of our people managers towards managing remote teams. Now, because if that's not there, again, what will happen is people will start burning out. And we are already seeing some mental health issues in some of the people in some other industry. And we see articles here, and when we discuss in the HR community, we do hear about it, and people are facing mental health issues. So there are two or I would say three aspects of it in this. How do you really manage it? First is, as managers, one needs to understand that employees at home, it is about, it's not only managing the work, the person is also managing home. Because what is happening is now kids' classes are online, so that's happening at home. If their spouse is working, he or she is also working from home. And then we still don't have the house helps to help you with the things. You have to do it all for yourself. So in such a situation, recognizing the fact that it can't be that somebody is logging in at 8 o'clock in the morning and logging off at 6 o'clock in the evening, expecting that is not right. It's about, as managers, how we can give flexibility to our people, to deliver on the output. One of the key things which I always say is that work is not something where you go to. Work is something what you accomplish. There's a difference between work and workplace. Many people confuse work and workplace together. Going to workplace means working. It may also happen that people are going to workplace and still not working. And we see this concept of what they called as presenteeism, when you're present in office but you're still not working and idling your time. So the key aspect on which the managers need to be sensitized in these times is about how do you separate work and workplace, and how do you ensure that an employee has his or her personal needs also to attend at home. Focus on the output and don't focus on the login log off time. And be mindful of the person's personal flexibility requirement in these situations. One may take a 2 hour break in the afternoon, to go and cook food and eat food and then do the dishes and come back. You have to do that. You can't really escape from it. Or same way, when the child's classes are ending or the child has a break in between, you have to take a break, and maybe if the child wants some snacks and to give to him or her, you have to do that. Or there's somebody at home, who's come in for any kind of a household work, or a electrician work, or a plumbing work, or whatever, you have to be there. So be mindful of the fact that employees have their personal flexibility requirements, and give them that flexibility. Focus on the output, don't focus on time. I think that's the first thing which managers need to focus on in this remote working. Second piece is, how do you ensure that the team comes together? So how do you still ensure that the social bonding is happening? See, in offices, what happens, apart from work, we also socialize. We also have a lot of what we call as the coffee corner conversations, or the pantry conversations, or the water cooler conversations, where you talk about what's happening outside, you talk about what's happening in the company, you say something about your boss, you say something about the company. All of that stuff happens. It's very normal. Those then you have those gossips in the office, the grapevines in office. So it's all of that which is kind of keeps you socially alive. In such a situation, how can you create such forums in a virtual environment where you are not talking work, but you are still allowing the team to bond, you are still allowing the team to come together and relax and have some fun times, have some social times. So that's a second important piece which a manager needs to focus on. Don't just focus on work, but also focus on the social time. The third piece is about how do you start managing your team members. And when you say managing your team members, you also manage their emotional health. And what do I mean by that? See, when I'm in office, when my team member comes in, walks in, I see him or her, and from the facial expressions or a body language, I can understand the person is happy, sad, excited, disappointed. You can very clearly find out, and then you can have a conversation. Hey, if something bothering you, it seems, let's sit and have a chat. Maybe something I can help you with, is something work related or something personal. If do you want to speak about it. And if there's a good bond between manager and the employee would speak to the manager and share it. In such a situation, in a remote working situation, I don't see my employee on a daily basis every day. And even when there are calls, most of the calls, we don't really switch on our videos. We tend to keep it more audio calls. So I really don't know as a manager what's really happening to my employee. Is the employee feeling good, not good, happy, not happy, distracted, not distracted? So as a manager, it's critical that whenever you start a meeting, whenever you start a discussion, start with a check-in. And check-in means very clearly, 2 or 3 basic questions. What are you feeling at this point of time? Start with the let a person speak out. Is there anything preventing you from being here? Let the person tell it that there is a distraction, and then you can understand the employee's mental health much better. And when you understand the employee's mental health, you'll be able to help him or her deal with it. And when the person is able to deal with it is in a positive frame of mind, the output will always happen. So otherwise, if somebody is distracted, the person will make more mistakes in the work rather than anything else. I can give you a live example. There was one of my colleagues who was really, there was when I asked this check-in question to him, he for a moment just paused, and the moment he paused, I sensed something is wrong. And we were at 10 o'clock in the morning having this meeting, and I asked him again. I said, "Would you like to speak about it? And if there's something in your mind, feel free." And ultimately, it's going to remain between both of us. And then the person talked about it. And I can tell you, we had a 1 hour meeting and 45 minutes went into that check-in process only. The guy was so full, and the person, he just wanted someone to listen to him, what the person was going. There was a challenge which he was facing with one of his friend was facing, and the friend was extremely close friend of his, and he was really in a state of mind where he can't help, but at the same time was really concerned about the friend, and that was taking a toll on his mental health. And for 45 minutes we just continued talking about it, and then we said, okay, we'll reschedule the meeting, but this is more important. Now, that's critical skill which each manager needs to learn. When you are managing your teams remotely, create a good emotional bond with the team member, and also ensure that you give a safe space for people to speak out to you. And more so in such remote environments, more so in such realities where people are really full and they really want somebody to speak to hear them out. And if as a manager you can do that, everything else will follow. You take care of their socializing needs, you take care of their personal needs, and you take care of their emotional needs. I think if these three things a manager is able to do well, you can easily manage teams in remote. If not, if even one of them is not doing this, things will start. Things will not be in the right place.
That's a very refreshing and a very forward view that I got from you. Moving into the last section that I wanted to touch is the future of HR. In the beginning of the webinar, we touched the point of how HR landscape has grown, and AI and big data, data analytics has become a part of it. What are your, if you could give us a deeper view into how will be the interaction between these technologies and the HR?
See, both have to go hand in hand. They both have to work together. It's never one against the other. Technology is an enabler, but the key thing to remember is that we should use enabler as an enabler, and that's what I was saying at the beginning. That what has started to happen earlier, and it's in a way it's good change which is COVID has brought in, because COVID has brought the focus back on the human aspect of human resources. Because what was happening earlier was that technology was overtaking HR. Everything was becoming employee self-service, employer self-service. You go and do it. It's good. I'm nowhere saying it's not good, but then there still needs to be a human touch. We still need to have, as human beings, we still love to talk. We still love to socialize. And I was saying, so all these issues which employees are facing these days, all the mental health issues which are coming up, or depression issues which are coming up. Why? Because all the tools are still there. The employee self-service, manager self-service, everything is there. There's nothing which an employee can't do today sitting at home, which he or she was doing it in office. But what they're lacking today, or what they're missing out, is that human touch. So this is the crux of it. So using technology is good. Use technology for taking the right decisions for people, but you have your ears on the ground. And at the same time, don't indiscriminately use technology. See, sometimes what happens is you get a data, but what is the story behind the data? Data will never tell you. So if I give you another example, and this was an interesting case which happened with one of my friend, and he was narrating it to me, that one of the team members in his team was not performing well, and they were looking at the targets and all for the last 2 to 3 months continuously, that the targets were down. So what typically do in most of the organizations? They look at it. Hey, the things are not going well. You'll have a conversation with the person, put a person in a performance improvement plan, or tell, hey, your goals are not really meeting. You give that feedback and expect the person to have improve oneself. But and the manager tried to ask a couple of times, and the employee said, no, nothing. I'll try to improve. I'll try to improve, and that's what kept on happening. And then the system was so automated that if in 3 months consistently, if you have not met kind of output from there, because every month you're feeding in what was your target, what was the result, it automatically generates a performance improvement plan. So that's how the technology was set up, and the spiral because there was something which was bothering the person, and without understanding what was there, the person was put on a performance improvement plan. Then one of there was an HR intern over there, and she just she overheard a conversation happening. Oh, this employee is not working well for the last 3 months, and she is going to be on the PIP. And this intern said, okay, let me just speak to her to see what's really happened. And this employee once, so, okay, we want to just let's spend an evening together, and they went out, for a dinner, and then they were having a chat there. And this is where, when they were kind of going, and they got really friendly. This employee shared with that intern that she is facing major issues in her marital life, and they were having a divorce, situation at home, and that is what was so. And there was an issue over the custody of the child, and then and that was really bothering her more than the divorce. It was the custody of the child which was bothering that employee. That where should the child go, because both of them wanted to have the child with them, and that was so much overwhelming that that employee was just not able to focus on work. Now, data won't tell you the story. This story came out only when somebody spoke to that person, and these are very personal matters. People generally don't talk much about in organizations. So, but that's where the skill of an HR person lies. That's where the human touch lies. So one should use technology for all the analytics, look at the data. One can see the data coming in last 3 months, the person has not really performed. But before triggering that PIP, performance improvement plan, if somebody would have spoken to that person, the person would have got into a further spiral about the fact that, hey, on one hand, one is facing this issue at a personal life, and the person herself was not very happy that the targets are not being met. And on top of it, you put a PIP, and most companies you see a PIP means an exit route. So PIP means 3 months, and will essentially means that after 3 months, we are going to say that, please, move on. You are not really performing. So use technology. Use technology for an analytics. Use technology for understanding what's happening. Use technology to understand what's there. But have your ear to the ground to know the story behind behind what is happening. Don't just rely on the data. It's good to have data. It's because that makes a decision much more richer. But at the same time, we need to have decisions which are richer in the context of human sensitivity also, not just a technical sensitivity. So that's why I always say that it's important that we are in human resources function. The humanness cannot go away. We always need to have that empathy factor in the organization. And that's where a human resource professional always has to work with heart. We tend to sometimes go overboard in terms of business partnering. We start taking decisions which are reckless, which are about, cut the headcount, cut the, cut salaries, cut this benefit. All of that stuff keeps happening because this is what the business leader is saying, or this is what the finance person is saying. Look at what's the impact going to happen, on the ground. So that's what my view is. At the same time, I have leveraged technology a lot in terms of a lot of data analytics around why the diversity numbers were low in the organization. And we created a good program out of it too, because that gave us a good insight. So use data for an insight, back it up with actual stories about what's behind that insight, and then create, the initiative rather than directly jumping onto a data. Listen to the story behind the data. That's what I would say.
Definitely, very insightful point that data technology can only be an enabler, but the important part of HR is the human, the first word of it. And I'd like to pose my last question of the webinar talking about this aspect, is that a lot of organizations are now trying to become younger, according to the trends. And could you give me some insights about how organizations decide process to invest in the next generation and in something called succession planning?
That's the most critical aspect in an organization, that how do you really create new leaders. It's that shows the strength of, or the bench strength in an organization. How do you create that bench? How do you create that pool of people who are willing to, who are ready, not even willing, who are ready to take on the responsibilities? And every good company would look at it from a point of view that fundamental enabler of a good succession planning initiative is the leader's buy-in. Till the time the leadership doesn't invest in people, this thing, the succession planning will not help. All good companies I have seen, I have the privilege to work with some of the really good names, whether it was Johnson and Johnson or Philips or now Volvo, T in between. The succession planning discussions are always held, very regularly every quarter with the CEO and the entire leadership team, himself or herself, all of them investing their time on it. I think that's the first important piece because that shows the commitment. Without that, things will never percolate down. So having a formal session at that level is important. Second piece, when you are talking about developing leaders at the next level, it's always about how much broad based we can have the views about our employees. Many times in many organizations you have the manager only giving the perspective, and you disregard the perspective of other stakeholders, and this is one fundamental mistake those organizations make. For a leader to be successful, one needs to have buy-in of people around him or her. One needs to manage the stakeholders well, and the stakeholders also need to believe that person's leadership ability and capability. Now you put a person up there without investing or without hearing what others are saying may not work. Sometimes a manager only, oh, my guy is great, fantastic, fit to be promoted, he's doing great job, and you disregard the fact that what the sales, let's say take example of a salesperson. You disregard the fact that the finance person is saying, yeah, so many accounts, there's so many receivables from the sales which he's making. The most of the sales which he's making is not generating money in cash. It's only we are only giving stocks and that's it. Or somebody or the team members that are trying to say that, oh, he's not really managing the team well, he's just pushing his team members a lot without really working with them. That leader, the moment you put him or her into that higher role, the person is bound to fail. So second important part is how do you ensure that while grooming leaders to that level, we are hearing all the stakeholders and having a more comprehensive view about the ability and the capability and the development areas of the person, and then we start investing in. Third critical piece over here is about understanding what is the role requires and where is the gap. Many companies don't have something what we call as success profiles. Now, what's a success profile? Success profile essentially means that what is needed to be successful in that role. It's generally we focus about the experience, we generally focus about competencies, we generally focus about educational qualification, but we miss one important aspect, which is the personality of the person. Every personality is not suited for every kind of role. There has to be, apart from a capability development, there also has to be a personality match. Are we focusing on that? Companies which are successful are the ones who are also ensuring that the right kind of person is put in the right kind of roles. So doing a personality matching also, and before that, articulating what kind of personality is required for being successful in a role is critical. So creating that aspect is important. Other piece is about how do we really, when we identify certain people who are our high potential. So we have gone through this process of listening to stakeholders, leadership buy-in is there. We have done a personality match. Everything is done, and we are saying, okay, this person X is a succession plan for for role A, role B, role C. Now the next point is how do we really build that capability? And building that capability is not always a training program. And many people feel that building the capability meaning send a person to a training program, send him to some college or some IIM program or some technical program, and the capability will be built. That's never the successful formula. The successful formula is about building capability through experiences. And then how do you provide the person with the right experiences to build that capability? So it means that you start putting that person into cross-functional projects. You start putting the person into projects which will test those competencies and will help person develop them. Put them into roles which are beyond the person's comfort zone. Put them into roles which are beyond the person's regular, job, because that will broaden the person's perspective. Because if somebody, the sales guy, put him into a supply chain project, somebody's supply chain person, put him into operations project, somebody's operations person, put him into, let's say, a HR project, whatever. So broad base that capability. Put the person into projects where somebody is learning something else, and that starts to build the right capabilities in the person. And that's when you also learn it by doing, and not just learn it by reading a book, because there are enough books otherwise to read. Nobody can learn swimming by reading books. You have to learn swimming by jumping into the water. You have to learn to drive a car by going behind the steering wheel. Just knowing that you have a clutch and accelerator and brake, and this is the steering wheel, doesn't make you drive confidently on the road. The confidence comes only when you are actually practicing it. So how are you stretching that person? And then this is where the leadership roles again comes in. As a leadership, don't hold on to your people, set them free, let them experiment with their free time. Give them the free time to experiment with what else they want to learn, what else they want to do in the organization, because then only you will be able to create successful next level leaders. Many people tend to hold on to their talent. Many leaders say, oh, if I'll give 20% of my bandwidth to this person, what will happen to my job? They forget the fact that if I'm saying somebody is high potential, the person will be able to do that job and still be able to do something else. Because as you go up in the system, you need to expand your bandwidth. And this is the test to test that piece, that whether the person is able to expand the bandwidth or not. So give that person that chance, rather than holding back that person and saying, oh, my world will collapse. Nothing collapses. It's just a fear which many leaders have. So as a leader, be enterprising. As a leader, take that risk, take that bet on people. So that's another critical piece which I would say. And the last one I would say, very, very important piece is take bets on people. Sometimes somebody may not be 100% be right for the job. But the fact that when you put a bet on the people, on that person, and tell the person that I believe in you, you may not be 100% ready, you may be 70% ready, but I believe you can do the job 100% well. I can tell you the person rises to the occasion. The person also has that hunger to prove himself or herself that yes, I am the best person for the job. So take bets on people. Sometimes we just want the person to be 100% fit before we put them onto the next level roles. Don't wait for that, because if you're finding 100% fitment, you will never have that role will never be aspiration for that person, because that every 100% fitment means the person has done everything which that role requires. Then what's the fun for that person? What's the challenge for that person? The challenge for that person is only when somebody is 75% ready, and that's where the person grows, and that's what the person actually develops the larger capability and stretches and thinks something in a different manner. So take bets on people, I would say. Don't wait for 100% fitment. 70-75% fitment, it's good enough for somebody to be put on that role. And let the person, maybe the person will struggle for a few for some time in the beginning. Have that safety net with you, so that don't allow that person to drown, and you'll very soon see the person is really swimming very well in the waters.
Absolutely. Thank you for this futuristic view and a view into the growth of the firm as well as the employee. I really would like to thank you, Mr. Sharma, for the opportunity of having this webinar with us. Thank you for your time, and it has been a privilege to learn from your experience and your insights. Thank you.
My pleasure, Sakshi, and really enjoyed interacting with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to having more collaborations with Speakin and Volvo.
Sure, definitely.
Thank you.